The only sound in the small Philadelphia duplex was the low hum of the refrigerator and the gentle scratching of Jessica's yellow highlighter against the page of a heavy anatomy book. It was past 1 in the morning. The city was sleeping, but Jessica, at 24, was on her third shift of the day. The first was at the university, deciphering the mysteries of the human body. The second was at the hospital, changing sheets and checking vital signs as a nurse's assistant. And the third, this one, the loneliest of all, under the dim light of a lamp on the dining room table, fighting sleep to secure a future that seemed to grow more distant with each passing moment. A smell of reheated coffee hung in the air. The house was spotless, a reflection of Jessica's invisible effort to maintain order amidst the chaos. Across the room, the door to her brother Kevin's room was ajar, revealing a pile of clothes on the floor and the screen of a video game blinking on standby. He wasn't there, as usual. At 20, Kevin's only commitment was to the next party, the next hangout with friends, the next wave of fun funded by someone else's sacrifice. Mainly, her sacrifice. Soft footsteps descended the stairs. Sharon, their mother, appeared in the living room, wearing a faded robe. Her sleepy eyes passed over Jessica and her mountain of books, without really registering the scene. "Jess, are you still awake?" she asked, her voice filled with that superficial concern that always preceded a request. "I have a test tomorrow, Mom, and I have to be at the hospital at 7, Jessica replied, without looking up from her book. The word Mom came out drier than she intended. Sharon went to the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, and sighed. "Has your brother gotten home yet?" "No." Jessica's answer was a clipped one. "I'm worried." "He said he was just meeting Mark, but it's late," Sharon said. And now, the concern in her voice was palpable, thick. She returned to the living room, holding a glass of water, and stopped beside a shelf filled with photo frames. Almost all of them displayed Kevin's easy, charming smile. Kevin on his high school soccer team, Kevin at his graduation, Kevin blowing out the candles on his last birthday. There was only one photo of Jessica, a portrait from 8 years ago where she wore braces. "He can take care of himself," Jessica muttered, more to her book than to her mother. Sharon ignored her tone. Her fingers brushed the frame of Kevin's photo. "He's so full of life. Sometimes he overdoes it, but he has a heart of gold. He just needs time to find his way." It was the usual speech, the excuse that justified every low grade, every late night out, every dollar that disappeared from her wallet. Suddenly, Jessica's silent phone vibrated beside her books. The name on the screen made her stomach churn. Mark, Kevin's friend. A wave of exhaustion so profound almost made her cry. She already knew what this was. It was the same call from 2 months ago, and the month before. She answered, pressing the phone to her ear. Mark's voice was a mix of amusement and panic. "Hey, Jess. Sorry to call, but I think you'd better come get Kevin. He's had a little too much to drink. He's talking nonsense and he can't stand up. We're at a bar on South Street." Jessica squeezed her eyes shut. The anger rose in her throat, hot like bile. "Again, Mark?" "My bad. We tried to send him home, but you know how he is," the friend said, already absolving himself of blame. She hung up without saying goodbye. Sharon stared at her, her eyes wide with anxiety. "What happened? Is he okay?" "He's drunk in a bar on the other side of the city," Jessica said, starting to gather her books with a contained fury. All her effort, her hours of study, thrown away for yet another night of the house prince's irresponsibility. "Oh, my boy," Sharon lamented. "Please, honey, go get him. I can't go. You know how nervous I get driving at night." The plea was soft, but it carried the weight of an unquestionable command. It was Jessica's role, the caretaker, the problem solver, the adult in the relationship. Jessica grabbed her car keys and purse, her body moving on the autopilot of resentment. That's when her eyes fell on a small drawer in the entrance dresser. The drawer where she kept the money she was saving for her books. She had saved $150 for the pharmacology manual she needed to buy tomorrow. Her heart froze. She opened the drawer. The envelope was there, but it was empty. A deadly silence fell over the room. Sharon saw the expression on her daughter's face and understood. He must have taken it for an emergency. The mother began, the excuse already forming on her lips. But Jessica wasn't listening anymore. She looked at her mother, at the genuine concern on Sharon's face, a concern reserved exclusively for her golden son. She looked at the empty envelope, the symbol of her hard work, violated. And in that instant, something inside her, something that had been slowly breaking for years, finally shattered completely. It was no longer about the money. It was about invisibility, about chronic injustice, about being a pillar that everyone used to lean on, but that no one cared to hold up. This wouldn't be just another late-night rescue. It would be the last. The engine of Jessica's old Honda Civic protested as it started up in the cold night. The car, bought with the money from her first year of work at the hospital, was yet another symbol of her forced independence. As she drove through the deserted streets of Philadelphia, the city seemed to mirror her soul, vast, indifferent, and shrouded in shadows. Each red light was a forced pause, a moment for the fury to bubble up a little more. The empty envelope on the dresser didn't leave her mind. It wasn't just $150. It was her sleep, her aching back, the skipped meals. It was disrespect crystallized in the form of theft. Memories of other violations flooded her mind, fragments of a lifetime of being the second choice. She remembered her 16th birthday, when she asked for a used guitar and got a practical sweater because money was tight. A month later, Kevin, 14, got a state-of-the-art PlayStation because he needed a hobby so he wouldn't hang out on the streets. She remembered the time she caught a bad flu in college, and her mother, instead of taking care of her, spent the day on the phone solving a problem Kevin had gotten into at school for cheating on a test. "You're strong, Jess. You can handle yourself," Sharon had said, not realizing the stab each word represented. She always knew how to handle herself. From a young age, she learned not to ask, not to expect, not to need. While Kevin was the sun around which her mother's small universe revolved, Jessica was the invisible gravitational force that kept everything from collapsing. She was the reliable daughter, the responsible one, the strong one. But strength, she realized bitterly, was a punishment. Her competence was her mother's justification for neglecting her. Her sacrifice was never seen as a gift, but as an obligation. The pulsating thud of a bass took her out of her thoughts. She had arrived. The bar was one of those trendy places, with a brick facade and neon lights that promised a night of excess. Jessica parked, took a deep breath, and got out of the car. In her worn jeans, simple t-shirt, and hair pulled back in a hurried bun, she was a ghost from the real world invading a fantasy of fun. Every look she received made her feel out of place, judged. She found Mark near the door. The relief on his face was evident. "Thanks, Jess. He's in the back, near the bathroom. He's pretty excited." Jessica walked through the crowd, her body rigid. And then she saw him. Kevin was standing on a chair, a drink in his hand, singing a song off-key while his friends laughed. Not with him, but at him. He was the court jester, desperate for attention. When he saw her, a mocking smile spread across his drunken face. "Look who it is. My sister chauffeur. Did you come to give me a ride, sis?" he yelled, to the delight of the impromptu audience. Jessica didn't say a word. The humiliation burned on her face, but her eyes were cold as ice. She walked over to him, and with a strength that surprised herself, pulled him by the shirt, forcing him to get down from the chair. "We're going home. "Now," she said, her voice low and dangerously calm. "Hey, calm down, General," Kevin mocked, stumbling. "The party's good. Here, take this." He took a crumpled $20 bill from his pocket and held it out to her. "Take a cab. I paid with the money I borrowed." He winked, as if it were the funniest joke in the world. The blatant confession, the arrogant smile, everything conspired to solidify Jessica's decision. She grabbed his arm tightly. "You're not going anywhere. You're coming with me." The walk to the car was a depressing spectacle. Kevin leaned on her, heavy and clumsy, muttering protests. People looked, some with pity, others with contempt. Jessica felt nothing but a glacial determination. She threw him into the passenger seat and slammed the door shut. The drive back home was made in a heavy silence, broken only by Kevin's alcoholic breathing, as he fell asleep almost instantly, his head leaning against the window. Jessica drove, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. She didn't look at him. She looked at the road ahead, at the city lights that passed by in a blur. Every mile she traveled brought her closer to the final confrontation. The anger had settled in the pit of her stomach, turning into something harder, heavier, the certainty that, when they got home, the silence she had maintained for 24 years would be broken forever. The front door opened with a click that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet of the early morning. Jessica entered, dragging Kevin's dead weight, who was muttering disconnected words. Sharon rushed to them, her face a mask of panic. Her eyes passed over Jessica's exhausted and pale figure and focused only on her son. "My God, Kevin, what happened to you? Is he hurt?" she asked, trying to support her son, who could barely stand. "He's drunk, Mom, as usual," Jessica replied, her voice devoid of any emotion. With a final effort, she guided him to the sofa and let him fall. Kevin landed with a dull thud and immediately began to snore. Sharon's concern turned into irritation, but the target, as always, was her daughter. "You didn't have to be so rough with him, Jessica. Look at the state he's in. He's your brother." "Yes, I know. And because of my brother," Jessica said, walking slowly to the dresser near the door. "I had to go out in the middle of the night, drive for 40 minutes, and be humiliated in front of a whole bar. And because of my brother." She opened the drawer and pulled out the empty envelope, holding it between her thumb and forefinger, as if it were evidence of a crime. "I have no way to buy the book I need for my test tomorrow." Sharon looked away, uncomfortable. "Let's not talk about money right now. He's not well." She knelt beside the sofa, adjusting a pillow under Kevin's head with a tenderness that Jessica hadn't received in years. That image was the final spark. The sight of her mother caring for the architect of her problem, while completely ignoring her pain and sacrifice, shattered the last shred of Jessica's self-control. "Not now." Her voice came out low, almost a whisper, but it cut through the air like a razor. "It's all we ever talk about in this house, Mom. The money I earn and he spends, the responsibility I have and he doesn't, the life I'm trying to build and that he insists on sabotaging." "Jessica, that's enough." Sharon stood up, a defensive tone in her voice. "He's younger, he's lost. You've always been the strong one. You have your job, your studies. He has nothing. A little bit of money won't hurt you." "A little bit of money?" Jessica laughed, a dry, joyless sound that made her mother recoil. "It's not about the money. Don't you understand? It never was. It's about this." She pointed from her own chest to the sleeping figure on the sofa. "It's about you looking at both of us and only seeing him. It's about me having spent my entire life desperately trying to earn a drop of the love and concern you give to him for free, no matter what stupid thing he does." The tears, which she had held back so tightly in the car, now streamed freely down her face, but her voice didn't waver. She turned into a hurricane of bottled-up truths. "While I was coming home exhausted from the hospital, You'd ask me if I remembered to buy his favorite ice cream. When I got first place on my college entrance exam, you threw a party because he had barely managed to pass a grade in school. Every one of my achievements was a footnote in the biography of your perfect son." She walked around the room, each word an accusation hanging in the air. "You didn't raise me to be your daughter. You raised me to be his caretaker, his driver, his sponsor, the adult who fixes problems so your prince never has to face the consequences of his actions. I paid his bail when he was caught spray painting a wall. I lied to his boss when he skipped work because he was hungover. I sacrificed every party, every trip, every cent, so this family wouldn't sink. And what was my reward? Hearing that I'm too hard on my poor little brother." Jessica stopped in front of Sharon, her face inches from hers. The pain of 24 years of invisibility burned in her eyes. "I ask you, Mom, when was the last time you asked me how I was? When was the last time you worried if I was happy, or tired, or scared? Do you even know what my favorite subject is in college? Or the name of my best friend?" Sharon's silence was the most eloquent answer. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Her face, previously full of excuses and justifications, was pale, shocked. For the first time in her life, she was seeing her daughter, not the rock, not the solution, but the young woman she had broken with the weight of her favoritism. "I'm tired, Mom," Jessica concluded, her voice finally breaking into a sob. "I'm tired of fighting for a crumb of your attention. I'm tired of being the shadow of your favorite son." She turned away, leaving the words echoing in the room. The silence that followed was heavier and more terrible than any scream. The structure of that family, the echo of Jessica's words hung in the room, dense and suffocating. Sharon remained motionless, her face pale. It was as if her daughter had held up a mirror in front of her, forcing her to confront an image she had spent her whole life ignoring. That of a mother who, in her blind adoration for one son, had sacrificed the other. Each of Jessica's accusations was a painful and undeniable flashback. The birthday party, the college exam, the countless times that worry for Kevin had overshadowed Jessica's needs. They weren't inventions of an angry daughter. They were facts. Facts that she now saw aligned, forming the terrifying pattern of her own failure. While Sharon was paralyzed by this revelation, Jessica acted. The adrenaline of the confrontation gave way to a cold clarity. She climbed the stairs, her footsteps firm on the creaking floorboards. There was no hesitation. In her room, the small and organized sanctuary that contrasted with the chaos of her brother's room, she pulled an old duffel bag from under the bed. With methodical movements, she began to fill it. Her hospital uniform, the most important books, the few clothes that really mattered. Each item she packed was a step towards a new reality, one where she would no longer be defined by her role as a caretaker. The noise upstairs seemed to wake Kevin. He stirred on the sofa, his head throbbing, his mouth dry. "What's all that noise?" he grumbled, trying to sit up. "Mom, what's going on?" Sharon turned to him, but the look in her eyes was different. The usual protective tenderness had been replaced by something complex, a mixture of pain and a cold evaluation that Kevin had never seen before. For the first time, she didn't rush to soothe him or ask if he needed water. "Your sister," Sharon began, her voice weak. "Your sister is leaving, because of you." "What? Because of me?" Kevin tried to laugh, but the sound died in his throat when he saw the seriousness on his mother's face. "Come on. She always gets dramatic like this. It'll pass soon." "Not this time," Sharon said, shaking her head slowly. Jessica's words still echoed in her mind. "Do you even know what my favorite subject is?" The simple question haunted her. She didn't. In contrast, she knew the name of every one of Kevin's friends, his favorite song, the video game he wanted. The disparity was a chasm opening at her feet. Jessica came down the stairs, the bag in her hand. Her eyes were red, but her face was impassive. She didn't look like a daughter running away from home, but a woman resigning from a thankless job. She stopped in the living room. She avoided looking at her mother. Her gaze fell on Kevin, who was now staring at her, confusion giving way to a flicker of frightened comprehension. "Jess, come on. Where are you going?" he asked. "I don't know yet. To a friend's house, maybe. To anywhere where I'm not the second choice," she replied, her voice firm. She picked up the car key from the dresser. "I love you, Mom, but I can't live like this anymore. I can't keep setting myself on fire to keep both of you warm." With that, she turned and walked to the door. There were no pleas, no screams. Sharon was petrified by guilt. Kevin, for the first time in his life, was speechless, confronted with a real and immediate consequence of his actions. The door closed behind Jessica, and the sound sealed the end of an era in that house. Inside the car, with the engine running, Jessica finally allowed herself to break down. The sobs came hard, a torrent of pain, relief, fear, and a terrifying freedom. She cried for the family she never had, for the mother she wished for, and for the girl who had to grow up too fast. But as the tears rolled down, a new sensation began to take shape in her chest. It was a feeling of lightness, the weight of pleasing, of fighting for recognition, of carrying her brother's burden, had been left behind in that living room. She wiped her face, put the car in gear, and accelerated. The streets of Philadelphia passed her by, but for the first time, she wasn't going to fix someone else's problem. She was driving toward herself. The road ahead was dark and uncertain, but it was hers. And for the first time in a long time, she was okay with that. 6 months later, Jessica's life had a different soundtrack. Instead of the anxious hum of her old house's refrigerator and her mother's footsteps upstairs, there was the peaceful silence of her own rented apartment, a tiny place with secondhand furniture, but that was entirely hers. The afternoon sun came in through the window, illuminating the nursing books piled on her desk and the guitar she had finally bought, propped against the wall. She had passed the dreaded pharmacology test and was excelling at the hospital. There was a lightness on her shoulders that she never knew was possible to feel. The break from her family wasn't easy. The first few weeks were a blur of loneliness and doubt. But with every bill she paid with her own money, with every night of uninterrupted sleep, she felt a new strength growing within her. For the first time, she wasn't the daughter, the sister, or the caretaker. She was just Jessica, and she was learning to enjoy her own company. Contact with her mother was sporadic. Short messages from Sharon, always starting with a cautious, "I hope you're doing well." Jessica replied politely but distantly, until one Tuesday, a different message arrived. "Jessica, your birthday is next week. I'd like to take you out for dinner, to celebrate you. Please, if you don't want to, I'll understand." That "please" was new. That "I'll understand" was revolutionary. Jessica hesitated, her heart torn between the pain of the past and curiosity about the future. She typed her response. "Okay, Saturday at 8. They met at a small Italian restaurant downtown, a neutral territory. Sharon looked older, the weight of guilt marking her face. When Jessica arrived, her mother stood up, unsure if she should hug her. Jessica offered a small smile and sat down. "You look great, honey," Sharon said, her voice choked up. More peaceful. "I'm doing well, Mom," Jessica replied. And it was true. During dinner, Sharon talked. She didn't make excuses. For the first time, she took responsibility. She said that after Jessica left, the house plunged into a chaos she didn't know how to manage. Without Jessica to clean, organize, and pay the extra bills, The reality of Kevin's behavior became undeniable. "He waited for you to come back in 2 days," Sharon said, looking at her own hands. When he realized it was serious, he freaked out. And I realized I had spent my whole life building a throne for a king who didn't even know how to tie his own shoes. And I ignored the queen who held the entire castle on her back. Silent tears rolled down Sharon's face. "I forced you to be the adult because I was weak, Jessica. I saw the strength in you that I didn't have, and I leaned on it until I broke you. There's no excuse for what I did. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for every time I made you feel invisible." Jessica listened, her heart tight. The anger she had carried for so long had dissipated in recent months, replaced by a melancholic understanding. "And Kevin?" she asked. "I gave him an ultimatum. Either he gets a job and starts paying you back what he owes, or he's on the streets. He's working in a warehouse now. Hates every minute of it, but he's paying his own bills. He's growing up. The hard way." The apology didn't magically heal the wounds of 24 years, but it opened a door. Jessica reached across the table and touched her mother's hand. "I'm growing up too, Mom. I'm learning to be my own priority." That night, as they said goodbye, they hugged. It was a shy, fragile, but real hug. It wasn't a return to the past, but the beginning of something new, something based on honesty and respect. As she walked back to her apartment under the city lights, Jessica felt a deep peace. She no longer needed her mother's unconditional love to feel complete. She had found that love within herself. The road ahead would still have challenges, but she would walk it on her own 2 feet, guided by her own strength, finally free. The shadow of the favorite had dissipated, and under the light of her own life, Jessica shone.